I was big into cloned phones. So I had to connect up in Washington Heights. So in Washington Heights, I'm going to break it up and explain to the people. So in Washington Heights back then, the Dominicans were on the lockdown. So the Dominicans would go by the George Washington Bridge and pull out scanners. And they would, scan the mobile phones coming and on the other side going. So you would have like 6 guys on the bridge. They would just walk back and forth and just with the antennas and bop, bop, bop. Of course, after a bit, they had to start changing, keeping it wide open because the cops were starting to wonder, where the is this going? Because the Dominicans were doing that, and then the Puerto Ricans in lower Manhattan were starting to like, hey, you know what, we're going to do the tunnels when they're coming in and, whatever. Yeah. And then they were doing it in Jersey on the other side because it was Passaic. So they were, whatever. So you had like lower Manhattan doing these. I didn't have any connections in lower Manhattan. I had most of my connections, in that area. So, and then my ex-godfather had another guy that we used for a bit, but the story with my godfather.
Right.
Not that he's a mooch, but I brought him into everything that I was doing. We were like this, like we were like brothers, thick as thieves. So I always felt bad and said, I'll put up the money. And I put up the money, get a garbage bag full of phones, 125 a phone. People that were really close to me, I'd give them to for 100, There was those Motorola flips, that really shitty plastic. I don't know how they made them so cheap, because phones were not cheap, but these were like just cranked out. You had a month talk time, It is
so
what
weird,
it is.
like hearing that now. Like you had talk time, or you had like
well, back then cell phones, because they were new.
Yeah.
Everything was like the way satellite phones are now. You were paying $3 a minute. Okay, so back then, you would get plans, 120 minutes of talk time. So anybody who wanted to get a cell phone would get the cell phone, and they would just use it for emergencies, or they would call the time check and just to look cool in front of somebody talking. Phones weren't really huge. They were in the richer communities and whatever, but everybody in the middle class and lower class, for $100, you get a phone. And at one time in the city, it was, dude. So if I went and I got, say, 3 garbage bags filled with phones, I had at least 50, 60 phones in each garbage.
Right.